Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Alchemize with Alanna. Would you ride your bicycle 28,000 miles across multiple countries, relying entirely on the kindness of strangers? There are seasons in our lives where vulnerability is a regular part of our experience, and then there are moments during those experiences that shape who we become. Those experiences are sometimes so painful that we try to find relief very quickly and we end up avoiding or running away from something monumental right in front of us if we're willing to stick around long enough. Joining me today is Nathaniel Allenby, an artist, performer, entrepreneur, and author whose life journey includes traveling 28,000 miles by bicycle across multiple countries, where he did rely on the kindness of strangers. And that experience became the foundation for his book, The Cycle of Kindness, and it shaped a life devoted to creativity, service, and helping others to see the possibility that exists inside even the most difficult chapters of lives. His work today spans performance art, visual art, storytelling, and entertainment through his company Cirque Cork, which I'm hoping I'm saying correctly, bringing creativity and joy to audiences around the world. For me, when I think about what I do and what I enjoy about my work, I often look for what's underneath the hood for people and for their businesses. And underneath his story is trauma, reinvention, compassion, and discovering meaning in unexpected places where he chose not to bypass pain. So, question for you, audience, for those listening live or for watching the recording, and please comment. We love to see those, and I do check back. When you look back at your hardest chapters, do you see only the pain, or can you also see how they have shaped who you are today? So again, my guest today is Nathaniel Allenby, and his story is a fascinating intersection of adventure, creativity, adversity, and purpose. And his travels were accomplished without money or technology, and that might trigger some people because we are so reliant on technology these days. And instead, he relied completely on human kindness. So it's a powerful reminder about generosity and connection, and how it's an important aspect of who we are as human beings. And this has contributed to him creating a life where he gets to bring joy and imagination to audiences globally. So welcome, Nathaniel.
Hello, Elena. And I'm getting that right, right? You got Cirque
Alanna.
Work right. Alana, thank you.
Okay, good. Yes,
We'll just
I
start off
love it.
there. I appreciate the introduction. It has certainly been a wild journey, one that I feel blessed by, and I could have chosen to feel inhibited by so much of
You
what I experience.
Yeah, you could have. And your journey sounds like an extraordinary one, and I don't usually use that word very often. And for many people, the idea of trusting strangers and the way that you did, as far as like food and shelter and safety, and I'm curious to hear more, probably feels a little impossible. Although sometimes with lots of things occurring in the world right now, I am seeing how people are really coming around and supporting one another. But, when we think about tremendous kindness from strangers, I've experienced it too in my life, but I don't know if I would set out on a journey like you did in on purpose that way.
Yeah, for
So,
many, it is an unbelievable journey. It wasn't necessarily well thought out for me or highly
okay.
intentional. I was in a very depressed place in 2005. I had dropped out of college, didn't know what to do with my life, was gaining weight, losing my eyesight, and my best friend offered me a one-way plane ticket to Europe and a bicycle when we got there. He had read a book called Off the Map about these two women backpacking in a similar way that we traveled. And he decided that this was what he wanted to do. And he was destined to find people willing to go with him. And that was 20 years ago.
Wow.
We
Wait, so
left
what
with
were there five of you that went?
just 3 to begin
Okay.
with. But the next summer, when we biked across the United States, there was a group of 6 and a group of 2 that all set out, different times, different starting points.
Very cool. Okay. Well, okay. So here's what I want to know is so during that 28,000-mile trek journey, what was, I'm sure there were many, but what was what was like the most memorable event or time where somebody showed you kindness in a way that you'll just never forget?
Well, there were many, fortunately. And one that really stands out to me, we were about a single day's ride west of Berlin. We were in the middle of nowhere, didn't really have a clue where we were going to sleep that night, per usual. And we could tell as we rounded a corner that there was a big party going on at this one house. And I stopped my friend and said, "Hold on, I got a good feeling about this place." And I went and knocked on the door and asked for water, and they didn't expect us because in this entire little village, the entire town was already there. Two of their younger folks had gotten married that day. So the
Okay.
entire town was at this
We're
celebration.
celebrating. Yeah.
And I asked for water, and of course they come back with water, and they're like, "Do you want some food? Do you want something to drink? Do you want to come in and join us? What are you doing?" And it became this entire evening of connection and really beautiful, positive emotional experiences, a lot of joy, exuberance. Somebody let us stay in their backyard that night. They fed us breakfast the next morning, and they must have given us 5 to 10 pounds of food to take with us, like fresh
Wow.
baked bread, rabbit loaf of meat that they had cured themselves, and vegetables from their garden and fruits from their orchard. And they were so kind, loving, and generous. I mean, it helped that they were already in a celebratory state, but
Right.
it was so incredible of an experience. And
Right. That's was right
honestly,
at the right time. Yeah.
yeah, there was a big difference between East and West Germany. We got a lot more rejections in East Germany. So this
Interesting.
one really stood out because we were so close to Berlin.
Wow. Huh. That is fascinating. Well, so, well, on that too. Okay, so it's seeing probably differences as well.
Mm.
How have your experiences overall? Maybe not that one because that was you. It's like you walked in there just right at the perfect time and moment. They were already in that state. But how has that experience overall helped you regain like this understanding of human nature and trust?
Yeah, so some people said no, but more than half were kind, generous, giving, and from a childhood of trauma, like you mentioned, I learned to distrust people. And so this
Mm,
really renewed and reinvigorated my faith in humanity in a
mm.
way that I can't imagine what else in terms of continuous life experiences would do. And so, as I continued to go on, the amount of positive experiences just stacked and stacked and stacked, where the number of negative experiences remained relatively minute and small.
Well,
To the point,
you're
go ahead.
no, all I was going to say is what you're not saying, but what I'm sensing, and what I also want to acknowledge. That's a long preface to say. It sounds like you didn't let the negative experiences negatively impact your experience as a whole, and instead you just kept going and just you didn't let it derail you. And I'm wondering, like, how much did you also not let it shape an opinion or judgment about, say, that town or the people from that country, or right? Because the world today is so incredibly divided, and I think it's all by design. And there's that opportunity in a moment where when we have a bad experience or we observe something that we can immediately go to a judgmental
Yeah.
negative perception place, but it doesn't sound like that's what you allowed to happen for yourself. So say, I'd love to hear about that from you.
Well, you're truly speaking to how the brain works. Our brain is designed to remember the negative, to focus on that mushroom that will kill us or killed a friend instead of the things that are edible. And that's
Mm,
what we remember. And even with that being the case, there were so many more overwhelmingly positive experiences that it was easy to believe that the next one was so much more likely to be positive than negative.
I
People
love it.
would open up their house for days. They were so inquisitive and curious about what we were doing. I remember another time where I just ended up on the end of a dead end road searching for a better view of the French Alps in the distance. And these two farm folk came out and were like, "What are you doing on our land? Nobody ever just drives onto our land." And I explained in the broken French that I had what I was doing. And it helps that French culture is very bike centric. So they have a lot of positive esteem for people cycling, but they could hardly speak to me. And we shared a really lovely cup of tea while staring at this absolutely majestic view. And these kinds of experiences just happened over and over again, including in what felt like the most unlikely places, times, and with people you wouldn't expect it from.
Was that one of them, or is there one that comes to mind?
Yeah. So in the first chapter of my book, The Cycle of Kindness, I open with the coldest day of my life. And I mean, it was so cold that as I was cycling, each hand would go numb every 10
Wow.
minutes. And I would put it under the other armpit and ride one handed. The river next to me, traveling from Toulouse, France, towards the Mediterranean was actively freezing over as I was riding, moving river. And I rode all morning, probably 6 hours without taking a break, eating while riding, going to the bathroom while riding, as comical as that was. And I finally made it to a warmer town. I could start to feel the Mediterranean breeze, and everything had basically already been closed down. It was the day after Christmas, but there was this little set of cafes and restaurants that looked like they had been open for lunch. And there was a homeless person at a bench smoking a
Mm.
cigarette. And I ended up going and picking through all the garbage cans, found some food, and then went to say hello to him, offered him some food. He offered me a cigarette, and we chatted in broken French and English. And we had this really incredible connective moment because this was the first person that I was engaging with after this near death experience.
Mm.
And it was so beautiful because I had next to nothing. He had next to nothing. And yet both of us shared whatever resources that we could. And there was this real heartfelt openness to it that even in situations on a day to day basis, I don't find very commonly. But I'm also not putting myself into the situation where they can exist as
Right.
frequently anymore.
So it's funny that you say that because I want to address one of the questions in the chat, which is perfect related to what you just said. And it's, do you think that most people stay stuck in that negative bias because they do not put themselves in enough new environments? 100%. It's so important to remove yourself out of your comfortable little bubble and out
Mhm.
of what everything that because the rest of the world isn't necessarily like that. And until you do, with intention, put yourself in other situations with people that you may never meet unless you put yourself in that situation with intention, you won't meet the homeless man who's going to, give you a cigarette when he
Right.
has nothing else, right? Or open his heart to you and share a moment with you. And, just the two of you sharing that together. It's, it it's moments like that where the rest of everything else doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because it's the connection, it's the exchange, we're having a human experience. And I think often we forget about that.
And not just a human experience, a intentionally authentic, raw, and vulnerable one. One of my favorite phrases that I've learned through emotional intelligence and leadership trainings is that growth happens in the uncomfortable.
Yes, it
When we're
does.
safe, we're in our comfort bubble. That's not the place where growth typically takes place. It is when we put ourselves out there, it is when we try new experiences and are intentionally willing to go into something that we don't have much experience in, where we may not know the language or have never met the people before or have struggled to trust in the past, like I have, and now have this opportunity to go through these repetitions of trusting and having faith and believing that truly reinforces all of those things and builds neural pathways,
Yes.
builds a skill set too.
Yeah. So it brings to mind, so I actually spend a lot of time in Mexico, and that's where I am right now.
Mm,
And I rent a house, and the couple is Mexican. And they have been so incredibly kind to me. There's been time I have a car down here, and there was, for example, a time where the transmission needed to be fixed, and I was out of commission for 3 weeks, and I live somewhere kind of in farmland, where you kind of need a car to drive to get food and go to places to be social. And they just handed me their keys to their truck. And they said, "Here, use this for as long as you need it." I offered them money to rent the car, and they said no. And then what was funny is I put gas in the car, and then they wanted to pay me for it. And I was like, "No, I don't want it." No.
aw.
It's just so interesting. Like I would have, whose landlord does that?
Sure. We do live in a highly individualistic culture that specifically has this set of traits and values that isn't necessarily community focused or
Mhm.
collective forward, if you will. Whereas there are a lot of countries in the world that are so based in that model that
Mhm.
they think nothing of it. To
Right.
engage on that level. And I truly believe that there are pros and cons to both of these kinds of cultures, and that I think we are in the process of globalization, which will create this collective melting pot where putting those two together, having the best of both worlds, so to speak,
Mhm.
will elevate cultural experiences worldwide.
Well, yes, it's the dichotomy, right, of what we're seeing happening in the world, and it is forcing us to have these experiences where that is occurring. And I also want to acknowledge a comment where it says, that we're talking about trust as a practiced skill, not just a feeling. Absolutely, because as a feeling, that's one thing, but it's a private internal experience. But to be practiced overtly, outwardly with someone else, that's where we give life to it. And that's what I think is really meant for it. Yeah.
Hmm. There are some pretty inventive, creative trust games, leadership exercises out there that involve trust that if people want to call it practice the reps of getting more experience with the skill set of trusting, there are certainly things out there that you can search for, find, practice with your friends, family, those who it's easier to trust. And there might even be, say, meetup groups or subreddits where people do these kinds of things both in person and digitally as well. So I
Yeah.
highly encourage people, get outside your comfort zone, learn new
Yes.
things. It makes our older age so much easier when we keep our neuroplasticity levels high, keep learning, keep growing, keep educating ourselves, and
Yep.
find more in life that you love doing so that
Yeah.
every
Well,
day is filled up with more joy. Go on.
yeah. No, I was just going to say with intention, trust comes up a lot in sessions with clients that I'm
Mhm.
consulting and coaching, both individually as well as working with teams. There's a whole conversation module that I have with teams on the topic of trust, of which we could talk about trust for days on end, right? But but it's built into it, and it's always really, really powerful to see them learn new things about each other, even when, say, a team has worked together for 10 years, and that's happened in my workshops. But I want to ask the audience another question, which is, when was the last time a stranger's kindness changed the way that you saw the world? And I'd love to pull us into the next topic of turning trauma into purposeful service, right? So your story includes a lot of adversity and difficult chapters where trauma, can leave lasting wounds. And I don't
Mhm.
know the specifics of your story, but when I look back at what those have meant for me, those experiences have become catalysts for my own growth, and for me to want to be of service to others. So, how did some of those difficult experiences begin to shape the direction of your life?
Well, I feel really blessed. I just hit my 30-year anniversary in psychotherapy. So to have this resource in my life is the major reason why I'm going in the direction of becoming a therapist myself. The
Oh,
one that
okay.
really stands out early on is that kids at school told me who I was and who I wasn't. And
Mm,
it took a conscientious choice to say, no one else gets to define who I am.
yes.
Only myself has that role and duty. And if I choose to accept what other people say, then I essentially trap and chain myself into caring about what other
I was,
people think of myself.
yes. Yes.
And so there's this concept of the courage to be disliked.
Yes.
And being authentic is one of the most important things in my entire life. I have a Latin word, veritas, tattooed across my chest, and one of its meanings is truth. The other is being true to yourself. And that
Yes.
matters to me so much that people have called me now honest to a fault, where I
Yes.
might be a little harsh. I'm working on that part. I might
Okay.
rub people the wrong way because I'm telling the truth. And I would so much rather repair a situation where I am telling the truth than be false, deceive, put on a facade or a mask that doesn't allow people genuine connection, and then need to repair that later because that breaks trust. Being false breaks trust.
Yes. Well, I resonate with a lot of what you're saying because, believe it or not, I was bullied growing up. I was very, very skinny and was late to uh, go through hormonal changes, let's say. So there was that. And, I too dealt with insecurities and having people tell me what I was and what I wasn't. And people actually kept doing that into my adulthood. And there's lots of interesting gaslighting that happens as adults in communication, and people don't even realize when they're doing it. But, I call that inner authority, and really standing in conviction with knowing who you are. And then, yes, there's ways to communicate things in a way where people can hear it and they won't shut down, while also standing in your truth, but doing it with positive intent. But I very much resonate with some of the things that you said. And now, in the work that thanks for sharing that with us, and congratulations on this new direction, you know, i- in making you realize that you too could help others in that way. Was there like that one moment where you said that to yourself, like, yes, I want to go in this direction?
So I've been doing circus for the last 14 years. That came from me being a part of a protest that felt absolutely futile. When
Mm,
I was fighting against something, it felt like a waste of energy. When I started creating what I wanted and being a movement in myself, doing something for something instead of against something is always
yes.
going to be more positive. And I went through this very profound next level trainings experience 2 years ago where I created a vision for my life. I had already gotten to this point where my body wasn't recovering the same way that it was in my mid 30s, let alone early
Mm.
30s or 20s. And how much more pain, stress, physical discomfort that I'm experiencing helped me to realize, okay, there's a higher possibility here. I don't need to rely on my body for the rest of my life, and I love being of service to others. I'm already doing it, being a circus performer. My service is bringing joy. Now I get to do it in what feels like just as important, if not more so, value of helping others heal their traumas, realign to their truth and authenticity, and find their source of joy from inside instead of providing them with a source of joy from outside.
Yes. Yeah, it's so much more powerful when it comes from within. So if there's somebody that listens to this and they're in the middle of their own difficult chapter, what can you share where they too can see the possibility that those experiences might eventually serve a deeper purpose for them?
So I love this concept of fail forward. Whenever
Okay.
you're trying something new, if we expect ourselves to be good at it, we're likely to be disappointed. It is the resilience and perseverance that comes through the willingness to fail forward. Every time we fail, learn from it, gain a little, gain the insight, find some value in the lesson that propels us toward this eventual goal instead of just expecting that we will be there without it. One of my absolute favorite speeches of all time is by Jim Carrey in his commencement address to Maharishi University. If you've never heard it, there are multiple versions available on YouTube. Totally worth checking out. And his key segment is do what you love. Take a chance doing what you love because you can fail at doing the thing that you don't love. And so you might as well give that thing you love a chance.
I love it. Yeah. So, in talking with you about all this makes me think about a situation of a client that I was coaching. And she had a situation at work where she was intimidated by her skip level. Now, if you don't know what that is, for those listening, that's your manager's manager. And this person's presence absolutely intimidated her to the point where in meetings, she would second guess herself. Her body would feel tightened. She lacked confidence. She would shut down and she wouldn't really speak up very much, but she wished she had. And so, something that we worked on in a session was for her to be more deliberate in stepping up in one of those group meetings and speaking up for herself in a way that she hadn't before. And she did. And what was really cool was afterwards, when we met, she said that there were moments where, yeah, her voice felt a little shaky, but that she contributed more to that meeting than she ever had. And then we also explored reasons why, that reaction that she was having wasn't really about him. It was brain, it's this brain science. It's her brain had already decided that he was dangerous, not in a real sense, but it was because, she was interpreting him as an authority figure, similar to some childhood patterns that she had experienced. And so, that can create uncertainty in someone's behavior and inconsistency in how they show up. And all of that can activate the amygdala. Again, if you don't know brain science, that's a part of the brain that scans for threats. So when that happens, the brain's instinct is simple: avoid, shrink, comply. But leadership isn't about that. It's leadership requires personal growth too. And so it requires often the opposite of that kind of behavior. So instead of forcing herself to jump straight into the hardest conversation, we focused on something smaller. And that was just humanizing him, seeing him as just another person. And so with that, she was able to speak up more. And then we created some small milestones for her. And by doing that, or the way that I do that with clients is I role play with them. And so that way it gets in the cellular memory. And Nathaniel, you probably know this too, that it creates kind of a future memory for your brain, and it trains the
Mhm.
brain to recognize what's possible. So, what was cool about that session I had with her was that by the end of it, she said, I don't want one person to dictate how I feel about the work that I love. So it totally relates to
Yes.
what you were talking about. So what I really want to, quickly share with the audience is, I offer a single session service called the Resolve session, and it's this kind of conversation that we can have that might be helpful to you. It's a very focused conversation. So anyway, but Nathaniel, back to you, because I think this is it, it totally relates to what you and I are talking about. And it seems like you're passionate about brain science the same way that I am. I can geek out on it all day
Totally.
long. Yeah.
I was actually in a community resilience model training this morning, and the thing that came to mind when you were talking is that good leadership invites all team member to speak. Excellent leadership provides a safe container where every single team member feels heard, valued, and at ease being authentic.
Mhm. Yeah. So, audience, another question for you. What part of your story might one day help someone else feel less alone? Because even though this is my first time meeting Nathaniel, my sense is that both he and I have moments throughout our lives where we've recognized that part of our story is now helping other people too. And it feels amazing to be able to contribute in that way.
Yeah, the
Um,
total goal behind the book was not to talk about myself, although
yeah.
that is what happens in a lot of it. It's as much my story as those who helped me along the way. And it truly is the story of faith in humanity, believing in the goodness and kindness of others for those who haven't necessarily experienced it firsthand.
Yeah. So I want to, just for the sake of time, because I could talk to you about this all day long. So, transforming pain through art and purpose. So, your work includes visual art, photography, performance, right?
Mhm.
Uh, and I can personally attest to some of this in a way because I learned how to dance at the age of 4. And
Wow.
dancing was a really big part of my upbringing. In fact, when I was 15, I would be at the dance studio for 15 and a half hours a week. And it was a big part of my identity. It was my safe haven. It was a place where I got to just be me and I never felt judged. And I could challenge myself and do something that I thoroughly enjoyed. And then when I got older and I started studying acting, believe it or not, I also studied stand-up comedy, which I totally
Mm.
sucked at in my 30s. But yeah, I too learned a lot about emotional intelligence in that and understanding and communication, like what we say or what we don't say, because we hold it in or we store it emotionally. So, how did these styles of creativity become part of your process for making sense of your experiences?
It took a long time for me to find the creative arts. It wasn't necessarily my first endeavor.
Okay.
When I began taking photos, it was simply because I loved the beauty of nature and then got better at the technique of framing and cropping and using the right settings and all of that kind of stuff. But the essence remained that I wanted to show other people the unspoilt beauty of nature with the
Mhm.
goal of inspiring anyone who saw my work to become greater stewards of our planet. On a totally different level with my juggling, I got to Europe and my best friend was like, "Okay, I spent all my money. We're broke. You get to learn how to juggle so that we can perform on the streets of Europe and busk," which comes from the Spanish buscar or to search, as in to search for one's profession by trying it out on the streets. And so we began, and I was terrible to begin with. I
That
mean,
is
yeah, it took me 30 hours to get three ball juggling, where in contrast, my best students have learned in 5 minutes.
nice.
And so
Yeah.
I then just kept going, and I'm a bit of a completionist. If I start anything, I kind of feel compelled to finish it. Don't give me a 5,000 piece puzzle. I don't have the time. Um, but in art, when I started drawing, it was because I had this mindset that I suck at drawing. Simple as that. That's what I thought. And I said, hey, I don't want to have that internal belief. I don't want to have that self limiting thought. I know how to get better at something because I did it with juggling. Time, practice, dedication, perseverance, having a good teacher really helps. And so I just applied the skills that I learned there to artwork. There's also a really great book called The Art of Learning. Definitely worth checking out. It's very story driven, but it's about this young chess grandmaster about how he applied his skills learning chess to everything else in life. And I
That's
had already read that book. And so that helped me
that's
apply
really
my
cool.
skill of learning elsewhere. And
Yeah. Well,
go
and you,
ahead.
I don't know if you know this or not, but juggling actually is great for adults and kids to do when it comes to learning disabilities or challenges, as I like to call them. I don't like to call them disabilities because it exercises both parts of the brain.
Yes, not only does it help both sides of the brain, but it actually increases the amount of neural connections
Connection, the neural path.
between
Yeah.
the hemispheres, which
Yes.
so few activities in our world really do. It actually generates a similar kind of neural pathway that we get when we build our compassion. And
Yeah.
so it's this really great thing. It delays the onset of Alzheimer's or dementia as well. It helps build, hand-eye coordination,
Yeah.
patience,
And
and
even just
so
with
many
two
other
balls, you
things.
don't necessarily have to do three, right? Like even just two, 20 whatever years ago, I'm totally dating myself now. When I first started learning about coaching, there was this family that I was helping, and one of their children, she had learning challenges, and she would get very
Mm,
frustrated with doing homework and would
mm,
lose her patience to be able to just sit still and do it. And so I would say, you know what? I brought a little juggling set and I said, let's go play. Let's go juggle. And so we'd go in the living room and we would start tossing, scarves or socks with sand in them or like
mm.
balloons with sand in them, whatever it was. And we would sometimes make them. And that got her up out of her chair, did something, physical. And then, like you said, was great for her brain. And then she'd be able to go back to her homework and get it finished. So I learned
Yeah.
that about that a long time ago.
There's a model for learning. I forget what it's called, but it's 20-20-20. You break up every hour into 20 minutes of reading or homework
Mm,
application, and then do 20 minutes of review, reflection, bigger picture synopsis kind of stuff. And then you take the last 20 minutes of the hour and do a physical task that has absolutely nothing to do with what you're learning, and you will
yes.
actually learn faster than if you just try to read or do for an entire hour straight.
Yeah. Or something else when I talk with leaders or business owners that I work with, and they lose their patience, or they have to work on a report, or they're working on a project, or they really struggle with finishing it. Because, by the way, something I've really learned about people over the years is that usually, like, you're kind of unique in starting and finishing. Most people are either good at starting something but not good at finishing it. And some people
Mhm.
have a hard time getting something started, but once they do, they can finish it. So I'll say, step away from the computer, go on a walk. Don't bring your phone with you if you can help it. 10 minutes, go get some fresh air, take your dog outside, or go in another room and do something like do some stretches or something. Just something completely different. And it helps them, calm, take a breather, allows their body to breathe in the moment. And that's where creativity can also come in because you're not forcing your brain to be thinking.
Yeah. Many of science and innovations, inventors' best ideas have come in a dream state, or just about when you're falling asleep or waking up, or in a moment when you're not actively working on the task. It's when those
Yeah.
eureka moments are most likely to arrive.
Yeah. So how do you've shared a little bit about this, but how do you see creativity as a form of healing or transformation, both for the artists, but also for our audience, which might be business owners and executives.
Yeah, I'm going to take this a little abstract, and
Okay.
I believe that we have a creator. I believe all of this existence that we experience came from somewhere. I don't exactly know where that is, but that this was created. And so, being a creative is what actually gets us the closest to our creator. And
Mm.
if you believe in harmonics, frequency, or resonance
Yes.
vibration, then
Yes.
you could look at this as having a very high frequency. Because in order to create, we get out of the part of our brains that criticizes, judges, and tries to label and box things into a comprehensible or understandable manner. Instead, we're utilizing a part of our brain that actually increases our imagination, free flowing artistry or creativity. It's enabling us to apply what we're doing in any art form to the rest of our lives. And
Yeah.
that's so important when it comes to when we're in the weeds and we're struggling with parenting and our kids are frustrating, or we've got this blockage at work and we can't figure out this problem and it just seems draining and exhausting, or we're butting up against some of life's most traumatizing moments.
Yeah.
That's when we can use these creativity skills to go, okay, what's the possibility here?
Yeah. What
What's
becomes possible? Yeah.
right? What's the
Yeah.
higher possibility? What's the yes and instead
Yes.
of the either or?
And I learned that in improv, by the way, when I studied
Yeah,
it, right? The yes and
love
yeah.
improv for that.
Well, and so yes, okay, so totally resonate with this is a has been created. I also we are in a matrix. Who or what created it? We are born creators. We are born to create. And what makes me sad is that sometimes, I'll talk to someone, a prospect, new client, and they'll say, "I'm not very creative." And then I'll through the work together, I will help them discover how they are actually creative. It doesn't
Hmm.
mean that you have to paint, right? It doesn't mean that you
Right.
have to perform in that way as entertainment, but we are all creative in the work that we do. Even if you're a coder, or even if you're in financial services, or you're in construction, we are born to create. And if you're not creating something and where you feel stagnant, it's because you're not exercising what your true capacity is and what you are really here to do.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with you. The more we can realize our potential, the more we realize our potential is limitless.
Yes. And then that's a whole other episode of the stories that we create to limit ourselves, or we become our own obstacles, or we tell ourselves a story or a narrative that, we're not capable or we are
Yeah.
limited, right? So, audience, another question for you. If your life were a form of art, what would it be trying to express right now? So,
Dang, you have great questions.
thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Well, okay. So, Nathaniel, I've got some rapid fire questions for you.
Okay.
But I just also want to say thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for sharing your experiences and your perspectives about this, because I think this is pretty inspiring. And I hope some people watching this will get some good nuggets out of this. And what also
Thanks.
stands out to me about this is that our hardest experiences don't have to be the end of our story. Sometimes they're the beginning of a deeper one, right? And it's that purpose that's rarely something that we find instantly. Sometimes it's something that we grow into. But we have to be open to it, versus shutting ourselves down from it. So, any last comments or questions about that?
Yeah, the dream is to turn any situation into this ideal outcome of changing the belief that we have about ourself towards that limitless capacity. There's so many things that people used to believe weren't possible until somebody did it. And I
Yes.
guarantee you that every single person who did it the first time, they believed that they could do it. And so, everybody who's listening, watching, truly, it takes work, it takes practice, it takes repetitions, but start to become aware of those beliefs that you hold on to that are limiting. Begin to release them, not by focusing on releasing them, but by gathering and holding on to these new beliefs that are of a higher and infinite capacity.
Yes. And the only thing I'll add to that is when someone does take the time to recognize what you're talking about and slow down enough to recognize it, also notice when you're doing it to yourself as well as creating an environment for others in that way too. Because sometimes how we treat others is a reflection of how we treat ourselves or our belief in ourselves as well.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The way we do one thing is the way we do everything.
usually is. Yeah. Okay, you ready for the rapid fire?
Let's go.
All right. First one. A place in the world that changed you the most.
New Zealand.
God, now I want to ask you why. One lesson. Well, actually, yeah, why? So quickly tell us why. New Zealand.
I was recovering from a ruptured Achilles tendon and a divorce. And I got to
Oh,
learn to walk all over again while visiting some of the most absolutely beautiful, unspoiled nature in the entire world, in meshed with and integrated into one of the most joyful cultures of the world. New Zealand is incredible on so many levels.
yeah, haven't been there yet. So now it makes me want to go. Okay. One lesson kindness has taught you.
That the more that I give, the more others give in a pay it forward sort of way. That
Yes.
the effect that I have is a true ripple effect outwards. It may not come back to me, but I know it's going to go out into the world.
Well, and see, I would challenge that and say it will come back to you. It might not come back to you from the person that you gave it to, but it will come back to you, right?
100% great up leveling of belief.
Perfect. All right. What creativity means to you in one sentence?
Ooh, that's a tough one. What creativity means to me is being closest to my creator,
Mm,
or call it a divine frequency, living my fullest existence.
beautiful. A piece of advice for someone searching for purpose.
Love yourself, and everything else will follow.
Hmm, beautiful. Last one. Something people often misunderstand about transformation.
That it's linear.
Same here. Yeah.
Transformation is not a one direction, one foot in front of the other kind of street. It is often sideways and off walls and diagonal and backwards, and has setbacks and obstacles and things to overcome. And the journey is so worth it.
Yeah. Well, and in the work world, it's no longer about climbing the ladder. It's about playing on the jungle gym.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
not about getting to a destination, but enjoying the journey.
Beautiful. All right, audience. So you can learn more about Nathaniel's work through Cirque Kirk, Allenby Art, and his book, The Cycle of Kindness. And if today's conversation resonated with you, take a moment and reflect on your own journey and what were the chapters that felt uncertain, painful, or unexpected that could become experiences that shape your purpose. And if you enjoyed this episode of Alchemize with Alanna, please do subscribe to the show. Share this episode with someone who might need this conversation and leave a review to help more people discover the podcast. So, in the meantime, if you're also a leader navigating growth, transition, or increased complexity and want a grounded conversation about what's really shaping your decisions, please reach out. One conversation can change a lot, and you could book a resolve session with me. And in almost all of those sessions, I ask for help. Clients ask for help on decisions that they have to make that are difficult or conversations that are hard for them. And it's about being brave to have them. So that's also why I created the conversation prep toolkit that is complimentary when you sign up for my newsletter. And it will help you with those moments where it might be a little uncomfortable for you to be more intentional, to have less worry or hesitation and communicate in a way that lands. So, one last thank you to Nathaniel for being on the show today.
It's an honor and a privilege to be here. I love what you're putting out in the world. Keep going.
Thank
Thank
you
you so
so
much to
much.
everyone who listened. And yeah, if there's ever any way I can support others, I love it when people call on me for that. So I'm here
Good.
to love to be of service.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Nathaniel. And thank you to those that were joining us for another Alchemize with Alanna. And we'll see you next time.